Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to Zhang Wei's thesis defense. And, thank you, Scott, for being here. And thank you, Leslie, for being here. So Zhang Wei, joined my lab in 2020. This was, brave Zhang Wei during COVID. And really the first set of students, who were joining my lab when there was no lab. So I think the starting was a bit, rough and a bit tough. But I think Zhang Wei was always, bubbling with ideas. And, he would pretty much come to me and tell me this is what I'm doing. And then if I would, discuss with him, he would always tell me, Pulkit, this is a good idea, but let's wait on it. And then go off and, do something different. And then come and convince me this is a cool thing to do. And hopefully you'll see a bunch of cool work that Zhang Wei has done. I think he has developed many interesting deep reinforcement learning algorithms. So I was back in my PhD, I was doing some work on exploration versus exploitation, and we were figuring out what are good metrics for doing curiosity or finding novelty. And at some point, I got disillusioned with that because there's always a new metric of novelty you can find and show that this metric is better than that. But no one would actually use novelty in actual practical deep RL. And the big question was, how do you end up, balancing the two terms, the exploration term versus the exploitation term? So I think Zhang Wei, had good formulations which tackled that. He had formulations which tackled this question of how do you remove some of the effort which goes into, manual reward design. But also Zhang Wei has been collaborating with, people who are trying to apply these algorithms. So he has a collaboration now with Mount Sinai, where he's trying to apply his algorithms in some ICU settings, but also working with some material science people now to see how you can help them design better materials. So, I think there's a, considerable breadth in developing algorithms, but also then trying to see if they actually work on something which is not robotics, which is what most, RL people end up doing. So Zhang, it's been, a pleasure to have you. But we'll still have to decide if you're going to stay here for longer or not. The judgment in the end. And this is, what you will typically find, if you think about Zhang Wei, Zhang Wei is always on his computer. Or he is presenting a poster. Sometimes you can drag him along and then, he would come on a retreat, but he would still have his, serious face. Right. And, this is Zhang Wei on hikes. And, this is Zhang Wei, socializing. And this is Zhang Wei presenting a poster. And this is perhaps the conference that we went together to. This is Hawaii.
No,
No,
New Orleans.
in New Orleans. Okay, this is New Orleans, yeah. So, this is Zhang Wei at the first thesis defense from my group at Tao Chen's thesis defense. I think one thing you'll notice is, how Zhang Wei's face is. It doesn't matter where Zhang Wei is. He's always thinking of reinforcement learning. So, Zhang Wei, it's been a pleasure. And, I'll, hand it over to you to tell us all about the amazing work that you have done.
Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, I'm going to present my thesis, computational discovery via reinforcement learning. When I say discovery, what's in your mind? Well, I think everyone has a different answer, different definition. But for me, it's about searching for a new knowledge through the interaction with the world. The research that got me interested in this problem is a reinforcement learning paper from DeepMind a long while ago. They learn to play Atari games simply through interaction. The game requires the agent to control the pedal, to move left and right, to hit the ball, and break the bricks at the top. As you can see, in the beginning, the agent wasn't able to score efficiently and sometimes even miss the ball. But if you let the agent learn for longer, we will see he learns to score, and most importantly, he even starts exploiting a bug in the game to farm the score. How the agent discovered this bug? Apparently, it discovers the bug from only trial and error, simply during interaction with the game, because reinforcement learning doesn't require any teacher supervision. If it was us teaching this agent how to play this game, say imitation learning, this agent could have become just an average player and never know how to exploit this bug. And that's why I'm fascinated by using RL for discovery, since it may discover the things that beyond what's known by humans right now. And to me, that's also how humans discover new knowledge, such as learning to use tools or discovering new ways of setting up the fires, etc. So I believe if we can understand how to make a machine search for answers from interaction with the world more efficiently, we can create an agent that continually discovers new knowledge in the world, advancing the science and technology. Now, how do we computationally model the process of learning from trial and errors? Turns out that reinforcement learning is a well-suited framework to think of the problem. And here's the standard view of RL. It's a closed-loop system where an agent takes an action at every time step and receive the feedback at such as reward or the other or the next state, transition to the next state, and then repeat. The objective of RL is to learn a policy maximizing the sum of reward while interacting with the environment. Learning without human supervision is fascinating, but it can be hard due to lack of learning signals. Now I want to illustrate this idea using this toy example. Imagine you are an agent exploring in this maze to find a reward denoted as blue dot. If you simply just do a random walk, it may take you forever to reach reward, since the maze is maybe just too big for you. As reinforcement learning's learning signal are from reward. In this case, RL would not learn anything useful because there's no reward for it. A straightforward way to fix this problem, for sure, is to shape the reward function to provide a dense learning signal for it. For example, we can add the exponential negative distance between the agent's current location and the blue dot as a shaping reward, so that the agent will receive learning signal whenever it reduces its distance to the blue dot. I visualize the shaping reward on this figure in red dot. As you see, there are lots of shaping reward around the agent. Our hope is that the agent can follow the shaping reward and approach the blue dot at the top more easily. Shaping reward is kind of a hint for the agent to optimize the task reward easier. However, our algorithm may hack the shaping reward function, leading to suboptimal performance on the task reward. In this example, it can keep farming the shaping reward by staying around the wall forever. RL is trained to maximize sum of reward, so the agent can exploit shaping reward and ignore task reward totally to maximize the sum of both. How do we avoid reward hacking? A simple approach for sure is to tweak the reward shaping function, but that's often tricky to get it right. Then I'm going to show you how to do it. For example, adding a penalty for a collision might stop the agent from hitting walls. But you could also make the agent stay near its starting point to avoid any risk of hitting walls. You could fix this problem by adding another shaping reward for moving away from the starting point, but then it creates another problem. It gets stuck in a corner. The naive strategy of mixing many different reward shaping terms until it works is a surprisingly dominant approach nowadays in applications of RL. Here are examples of the papers I took from Nature, Science, Coral, and they use RL on real-world application in different fields, including manipulation and locomotion in robotics, drone racing, video game playing, and even drug discovery. This reward function consists of a few task reward terms and a bunch of the shaping reward terms to assist learners. In this application, they only care about the few task reward turn they want to optimize, and the shaping reward turn are simply just auxiliary signal to make learning easier. We almost can say that to make RL work in real life, reward shaping engineering is unavoidable. But designing such complex shaping reward turns takes time. Do we have any principal solution to avoid reward hacking and improve the task reward performance when training with shaping reward? There is indeed a classic strategy that has been proposed decades ago, potential reward shaping. It was first proposed in 1999, and the many follow-up works continued extending this idea with many different kinds of potential shaping forms. The idea is to convert any given shaping reward function h to a potential function phi h. Their forms may be different, but the idea is the same, ensuring the optimal policy for j plus phi h to be the same as the optimal policy for j. This is the so-called optimal policy invariance. This, in theory, solves the reward hacking problem, but why is potential reward shaping not widely used in RL application? As you can see in previous application example I show you, no one has ever used potential shaping in their paper. The problem of this strategy is that they only guarantee the optimal policies for shaping reward will be the same as that for the task reward. But it's saying nothing about empirical performance, because we often don't get to optimal policies within finite amount of a training time. There is no guarantee that this policy trained with potential shaping will be better than the policy trained without it. It can be better, can be worse. But in practice, what we want is a new policy that is performing better than the policy trained with the best reward shaping function as you designed so far, or any other best policy you have before. For example, maybe PD controller or LQR controller. Whether it's optimal doesn't matter at all, because oftentimes we don't even know what optimal policy is and what optimal performance is. We care more about the relative performance improvement over the best policy you have so far. Now we know what we need is a policy improvement over a reference policy that serves the best policy so far. In the previous case, reference policy is trained with the best reward shaping function, but it can be trained with different objectives depends on the use case. We can make use of the reward shaping signals to make learning easier while imposing this constraint to ensure it's not hacking the shaping reward. To do so, we incorporate the policy improvement constraint into training objective, while training RL with task, reward J, and the shaping reward H. This way, we ensure that the policy that hack the shaping reward will be discouraged, since it will not satisfy the policy improvement constraint. And we call this policy optimization framework as heuristic-enhanced policy optimization, HEPO, or you can say HYPO. Now, let me illustrate how does policy improvement constraint works. Let's say the reference policy PyRef hacks the distance reward by staying around the wall forever and achieving 0 task reward. Now, we want to pick a new policy among these two, represented by 2 paths on this slide. Each one represents one policy. Because of the policy improvement constraint, the policy that didn't outperform the reference policy will be eliminated from the feasible solution set. As such, the optimizer will avoid choosing the policy hacking the reward shaping function, and they will choose the next one at going to the top. That's why policy improvement constraint can avoid the reward hacking problem. Now you might wonder how we tackle this policy constraint optimization problem in deep RL, especially since it's not easy in deep learning. Surprisingly, we find that turning it into a Lagrangian dual problem and using a simple gradient descent ascent method works really well. Here's what the Lagrangian problem looks like, where pi represents the policy we aim to learn, and the lambda is the Lagrangian multiplier. Lagrangian multipliers plays a role to scale importance of a task reward for policy optimization on pi. The derivative of the multiplier happens to be the performance improvement of pi over the reference policy pi ref. We can rely on policy performance difference lemma to estimate it, but it's not as trivial as we think. In our paper, we figured out some important implementation details to make it right. When policy pi performs better than the reference policy pi ref, lambda goes down, and meaning that the performance of the task reward is declined. The intuition here is that learning from the shaping reward H already helps improving task reward J, so the importance of the task reward can be decreased, and vice versa. As you can see, this objective is simply just another, it's just a standard reinforcement learning objective with a dynamically changing reward weight. This method is therefore agnostic to the implementation of the deep RL algorithm. You can use PPO, SAC, or whatever RL algorithm to optimize it. And we actually did it too in our previous work. And I'm going to briefly talk about that later. Okay, now let's look at the result. As we discussed, designing shaping reward function in RL often takes time and domain expertise to avoid reward shaping. For example, this is a reward function from NVIDIA's iSubject environment. The robotic engineer in that team designed a highly engineered effective reward shaping functions to bump up the performance very well. You can train a good policy with PPO with this very complex reward function very easily. But it takes lots of time to iterate the design of the reward shaping function from the simpler ones to complex ones. In the beginning of the shaping reward design, it may look as simple as this, like this one. But this kind of a simple reward shaping function could be prone to reward hacking, because as you it might ignore the other factors. If we can achieve the same task performance using this loosely designed shaping reward as we do with highly engineered ones, it could significantly reduce the burden of reward shaping for practitioners. In our experiment, we trained the PPO with 12 different reward shaping functions designed by graduate students we recruit. Those students are with and or without robotic experience, and they design reward shaping function by iteratively training the agent with their design and on the same task of opening the cabinet with a sparse reward. This figure shows the interquantile mean, IQM, of the normalized task performance, where each color denotes a different algorithm's task performance. Now, IQM, why we use IQM? IQM captures the central tendency of the data better and is robust to outlier and has become a recent standard of deep RL evaluation. As we can see in this figure, PPO trained on loosely designed shaping reward falls largely behind the PPO trained with highly engineered shaping reward functions. Now look at this blue bar. HEPO is our method. It is also trained with loosely designed reward shaping function, but surprisingly, it matched the performance of the PPO trained with highly engineered shaping reward function very well. This implies that practitioners now can enjoy better task performance with much less reward shaping engineering, because you can do so, achieve the similar performance with much simpler design. Now, I have already shown that HEPO can do better than PPO with loosely designed reward shaping. What about HYPO trained with expert designed shaping reward? Let's look at the in-hand manipulation task. It is one of the most challenging tasks with the sparse reward in robotics. The goal here is to reorient the object to a specific pose. Sounds straightforward for humans, but for a reinforcement learning agent that learns from scratch, this is anything but simple. Reorientation takes multiple precise steps, and one wrong move could send the object out of the hand. The task designer have already provided a dense reward shaping signal to make it easier based on the position, rotation distance, and more things. This will guide the agent towards successfully completing the rotation better. But take a look at this plot of normalized task performance of each algorithm. The red bar shows the task performance of PPO trained with expert designed shaping reward, as I showed in previous slide. The green bar is the PPO agent trained with potential reward shaping. Similar to the other prior work's observation, adding potential reward shaping actually hurts the empirical performance. And then HEPO is the blue bar. HEPO doubles the task reward, comparing with the PPO plus the expert designed reward shaping. This means that HEPO can further improve the task performance even if your shaping reward is already well designed. So far, I've shown that HEPO can make your job easier when you needed to incorporate your domain knowledge to shape the reward function. But sometimes we don't have the heuristic or domain knowledge to construct shaping reward easily, right? So what do we do in such cases? Clearly, we have no choice but to search throughout all states and action, but we should avoid revisiting states that we have already know are not good. Essentially, we want the agent to visit the state with reward or novel state. The pink dot here denotes the novelty bonus. The agent will collect novelty bonus while interacting with the environment. As novelty bonus will diminish over after visiting, the agent will eventually find the reward. The task reward denoted as blue dot at the top of the image. I'm showing you a short animation to illustrate how it works. In theory, novelty bonus should not cause reward hacking problem, right? Since it will diminish eventually, so at the end of the day, your agent will only maximize task reward. But in practice, the problem is that novelty bonus may persist throughout the training time due to model approximation error on the state novelty or uncertainty estimation. Therefore, the agent may capitalize novelty bonus and sacrificing the task reward again. And that's the reward hacking problem again. So here we showed that HEPO can actually also work with novelty bonus and make RL more efficient. Here is the performance on Montezuma's Revenge in Atari. Montezuma's Revenge is a notoriously hard exploration Atari games that you own. If you don't use any exploration novelty bonus, then you will get nearly zero reward. We trained each algorithm with R&D novelty bonus. R&D is one of the widely used novelty bonus for this kind of games. The red bar denotes PPO trained with R&D with 2,000 million time steps, while HEPO plus R&D trained with only 300 million time steps matches the performance. In contrast, PPO trained with 300 million steps largely falls behind both. Now, HEPO, we show that HEPO achieves 6 times better sample efficiency than PPO when using R&D bonus. To give you a better idea, we now just need 2 days to achieve to achieve the performance, what will require us 2 weeks to achieve. It shows that HEPO is versatile. In addition to human-designed reward shaping function, HEPO can also make better use of the novelty bonus. And more than what I presented above, my colleague have extended HEPO to different use cases. Here is one example of using HEPO's framework for teacher-student learning in robotics, where the shaping reward is the KL penalty to a possibly suboptimal teacher policy or a teacher policy accessing to the privileged information in a simulator. And we have also extended it to real robot, showing that we can achieve rapid locomotion with a simply energy penalty as shaping reward, whereas the past work required sophisticated reward shaping reward turns to achieve the similar level of locomotion behavior. Now let's zoom out a little bit to see where we are. Before HEPO, practitioners rely heavily engineered reward shaping functions to learn a good policy, or billions of data to learn a good policy with exploration with novelty bonus. After we propose HEPO, Now, practitioners just need a loosely decided reward shaping function to get a good performance, and we reduce the burden of reward shaping. And also, most importantly, HEPO requires much less data to achieve good performance with novelty bonus. And so far, we have enabled RL algorithm to explore through interaction with the environment more efficiently. But interaction can be expensive in some cases. For example, if you were to collect interaction data with real robots, you will have to take risk of breaking your robot, right? Another example is medicine experiment, where each experiment can take weeks or months to complete. And let alone experimenting on real patient is risky and costly. Having our algorithm collect interaction data from these domains can be one of the concerns. If interaction data is expensive and concerning you, what do we do if we still want to use computational tool to discover solutions? Offline RL provides a good framework to learn from static data set. Different from typical online reinforcement learning, offline RL learn from past interaction data logged by humans or any other controllers. During training time, offline RL does not interact with the environment. After training, we deploy the policy learned by offline RL to the world. Even though we have no interaction with the world, offline RL can still discover a better policy than what has been observed in the data set, which make it ideal for computational discovery problems with expensive interaction. After offline RL got attention in 2019, there have been more than hundreds of papers proposing different training objectives and model architectures to improve performance on the well-known default RL benchmark for robotic locomotion and manipulation. But we find that how data distribution impact offline RL algorithm has been largely overlooked in this literature. We found that current offline RL algorithms are struggling on imbalanced dataset predominated by low return trajectory data. Each trajectory consists of a sequence of states and actions, and its return is the sum of a reward of all the states within it. Such datasets are likely to exist in the challenging problems where high return experience are scarce. And let me explain what I mean by struggling on imbalanced dataset. In such kind of a dataset, offline RL's performance will not be much better than what has been observed in the dataset, meaning that they didn't find a better solution than the dataset. However, this kind of a dataset are missing in the current benchmark, and I think this is part of the reason that most of offline RL works in the past few years didn't spot this fact and keep developing algorithm based ignoring this factor. And the short reason for why most of offline RL algorithm fail is that they take pessimistic regularization for granted in their algorithm, while this regularization hurt on the imbalanced data set. I'm going to explain why it hurts. First, let's start by why offline RL can perform better than imitating the dataset. Offline RL provides improved beyond the training dataset by estimating the Q value of each action, which is the expected return of taking an action at a state. And then after they estimate the Q value, they find a better actions at each state based on the Q value. Now imagine an environment where the reward on the right is higher than the one on the left, and the agents start in the middle. Our data set included the state on the right, but missed the ones on the left. Now, if we want to find a better action based on Q value, how offline RL will do, given that we have no data on the left? See, we don't have the QSA2. So if we were to choose a better action at the state S, would offline RL choose A2 or A1? Unfortunately, offline RL can mistakenly assign high Q values to actions missing from the data set because of the extrapolation error in the learned Q function. In this case, the Q value of the absent action is 100, which is much larger than what it should be. The learned policy will then take the suboptimal actions after you deploy this policy to the environment. The current dominant paradigm in offline RL is based on is based on plasmatic regularization to address this problem. This is a principle used in majority of offline RL algorithm. And the idea is simple. It's just discouraging the out of distribution actions. They are rare in the data set, and encourage the agent to take in distribution actions that is more representative in the data set. This way, the agent will be pessimistic about taking an actions that is unusual or rare in the data set. And the learner policy is staying close to the data set. However, imposing this pessimistic regularization leads to a caveat. The agent may imitate bad experience in the data set, where the data set is imbalanced and predominated by experience with low returns. Why? It's because pessimistic regularization equally constrains the policy on all the actions. Then this figure will explain what I mean. So this figure shows the distribution of action on a state in the data set. The x-axis is the action, and the y-axis is the density or likelihood of this action in this data set. Now, the bad actions with low returns are denoted as the red dot, and the good actions with high returns are denoted as blue dot. And apparently here, bad actions are in distribution action as they account more in the data set, whereas good actions are out of distribution action. And if you apply pessimistic regularization, it will encourage the policy to imitate this bad action denoted as the red dot, because they are in distribution, and then negate the good action in the long tail part. So how to mitigate it? One way to address this issue is by reweighting the data based on their performance. We give more weight to the data that lead to higher returns and less data with lower returns, making the data set resemble the one collected by a higher performing policy. This helps the policy focus on imitating good actions while ignoring the bad ones. Now the question is, how to decide the weight of each data. We know that after reweighting, we can transform good actions from out of distribution to in distribution action, but we don't know how to decide the weight yet. Let's think of this problem from the first principle. We are concerning about the learned policy pi's performance on the task reward, denoted as J of pi. How does this depend on the data set? The value of J of pi is lower bounded by the performance of the behavior policy that collected the data set, and a constant on the data set's coverage. J of mu is the performance of the behavior policy. With this relation, we can increase either terms on the right-hand side to increase the lower bound performance of the learned policy pi. But how? We cannot do anything on the constant of the coverage because we have no luxury to collect more data. But the performance of the behavior policy here, J of mu, can actually be manipulated because it was reflected in the state action distribution of the data set. Building on this relation, the next step is clear. As long as we can express the behavior policy performance J of mu in terms of the weight of each data in the data set, then we can construct an optimization objective to optimize the weight. How do we decide the weight of each state action pair? First, we note that the performance of the behavior policy mu that collected the data set can be expressed in the expected reward of the behavior policy's state action distribution like this. So D of mu is the state action distribution of the behavior policy mu, and the R of SA is the reward of the state action pair. This is based on the classic result from Markov decision process literature. Then intuitively, you can think of D mu of SA, the state action density, is how frequently does the policy visit the state S and take action A. And the data set collected by the behavior policy mu are the samples drawn from this distribution. So you can think of taking the expected reward over your data set is equivalent to estimating this expectation. Now we can find a better data set. We want to find a better data set D, right? So then we can do it by maximizing this expected reward. Because this expected reward represented the policy that collected this data, the performance of the policy that collected this data set. And then we want to emulate a data set collected by higher performing policy. Since we don't know the data set D yet, evaluating this expectation is impossible. So here we adopt the commonly used importance sampling technique to rewrite it as a reward weighted by the density ratio. This way, we can evaluate the expected reward objective by sampling from the given data set, D mu, and use the differentiable optimization tool to optimize this term, because this is simply, you can make estimating this expectation by sample data from the data set and plugging into the terms on the right. We call this strategy as density reweighting. As we want to find a station density corresponding to a good policy, we maximize the expected reward weighted by the importance weight, subject to a Bellman flow conservation constraint. The purpose of this constraint is to ensure the station distribution is feasible station distribution in an MDP. For example, we cannot put all of the weight to the state near the on the go, right? Since we have to start from the initial state when we are actually deployed to the environment. The weight will be the learned policy, will be learned density ratio, D over D mu. After we got this weight, we can plug in this weight to train any offline RL algorithm with it. It is a algorithm agnostic method to change your data set weighting. So here's briefly how, here's a sketch of how we implement our idea. We model a station pair's weight using neural network. So we represented W as a neural network output with non-negative output activation at the end, and optimize the constraint objective using penalty method with a standard gradient based optimizers. And this is the resulting objective training objective for the neural net for the sample weight W.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The Bellman flow seemed to need the transition probabilities.
Yes, but that can be we can estimate that from the data set as well. I mean, you can, because we just, after you convert this thing to this objective, you can convert that constraint into expectation form.
I see,
So you
and
don't
then
have to
the
exclude.
sampling over the data takes.
Yeah.
Okay, but that has to get estimated from your data set, right?
Yeah.
Those probabilities come from the data set and those have to be frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now let's see how much it improves the performance. We tested it on imbalanced data set that low return trajectories dominated the data set. The distribution of the return in such data set will look like this. The x-axis represented the normalized trajectory return, and while y-axis shows the density of the trajectory for each return value. We see that high return trajectories are scarce in this data set. We build the imbalanced data set upon the existing offline RL benchmark in robotic locomotion tasks by retraining the policies and mixing the data set with the policies at a varying performance level. Okay, here again we show the IQM of the task performance of each algorithm. Here I'm showing you the experiment on CQL, but in our paper we evaluated on 4 different offline RL algorithms. So we evaluate CQL over 72 data sets. We normalize the return to range from 0 to 1. 0 represented performance of the random policy, and 1 represented performance of the expert policy. Okay, the red bar here represented the standard CQL with uniform sampling, while the blue bar shows our density weighted CQL, which performs about 4 times better comparing with uniform sampling under such data set. It suggests that reweighting data set is crucial for offline RL to work on such imbalanced data set data distribution. And then that is something that has been largely missed in this literature of offline RL. So my work opened a new direction of offline RL on imbalanced data set. We are the first work pointing out the issue of pessimistic regularization on imbalanced data set. And several follow-up works have already used my data set for benchmarking and extending my ideas for different data reweighting approaches. And we are also the first work connecting the state action density optimization to data sampling in offline RL. Although I have to acknowledge that state action density optimization has been explored a lot in offline RL literature, but that's mostly on policy evaluation regime, and less works use this density optimization approach to decide the sampling weight for training offline RL algorithm. Also, this idea has also been applied to a real application in medical in a hospital in a collaboration with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. They use offline RL with data reweighting method to train a policy to control medication dose in ICU. All right, so far my words have enabled practitioners to discover solutions under limited learning signal better improve online and offline learning settings. When learning from online interaction with reward shaping, we enable RL algorithms to continuously improve the policy performance within finite time. When learning from offline data set, we enable offline RL algorithms to be robust to data distribution, allowing them to learn from imbalanced data set predominated by poor experience. You can think of it when there are lacking of the good experience in the data set. That's kind of also a problem of lacking learning signals. Now, we concerned about finding a single good solution for a while, but in some discovery problems, we desire for multiple good solutions, not just one. For example, in recently emerging problem, red teaming large language models, we desire for multiple solutions. The purpose is to evaluate the target model safety by stress testing. Typically, model developers recruit a human tester to do this task. Human testers design prompt like this, teach me how to steal identity. That is a prompt that you can feed into ChatGPT. And the human tester will give them to the target model. And this target model can be any language model. To test the target model in order to trigger, and then the tester will design the prompt in order to trigger unsafe answers judged by a classifier for a human. For example, you can feed into maybe a harmfulness classifier to judge if the response from this target model is unsafe or safe or not. And the human tester's goal in this in red teaming is to come up with a prompt to elicit all possible prompts that will trigger unsafe response from the target model, so that you will know all the vulnerability or when does the target model will be unsafe. It's a hard to discover problem because there are countless possible prompt string you can make, right? Because that's a variable size of string. That's just you cannot enumerate this space. Manual testing is costly and slow, so researchers in this space are investigating using large language model for automated red teaming. Large language models are ideal because they can generate prompts similar to human ones. The approach is straightforward. Train an LLM as a red team model to create a prompt that makes the target model give unsafe responses. Prior work have used the reinforcement learning to train these red teaming models, rewarding them for successfully triggering the unsafe prompt, while discouraging them to triggering a safe response from the target model. And while reinforcement learning can find the prompt that trigger unsafe answer more efficiently than humans, but there's a problem. The prompt that they generate are lacking diversity. Quality is how often the prompt that trigger unsafe response from the target model. Like if you generate 100 prompts, and then you can measure the percentage of unsafe prompt the prompt you trigger unsafe answers, right? And the diversity is how different the prompt you generate are. So for example, if you generate 100 prompt, then you can measure some similarity diversity metric over this set of prompt you generate, right? And we want to maximize both. But if you ask the language model to generate prompts directly, like if you directly prompt your language model like ChatGPT to generate the prompt that to do red teaming, they are diverse, but rarely trigger unsafe responses from the target model. Which makes sense because those models were not trained for this purpose. After training the red team model with reinforcement learning, they can generate the prompt, they can generate more prompts that trigger unsafe answers. But the downside is that they become much less diverse. Ideally, we want both high quality and high diversity. So the best case is that if you generate 100 prompts, then every prompt has is better to be very different from each other, and all of them trigger unsafe answers from the target models. Previous work on automated red teaming also noticed this issue of lacking diversity for sure. But their approach is not quite effective. So how do they do? They have explored using they have tried to improving diversity through controlling randomness of the output. First method is using a kernel penalty to keep the policy close to the base model. The base model is the model that we used in the zero-shot method, which is the model pre-trained by a large bunch of text, but is not trained by RL. And because the base model has a diverse output, so staying close to this base model will ensure the learned policy pi is also diverse in the output. And the second approach is to adjust the temperature when sampling from the policy. Because in the current language model space, the policy is usually modeled by a Boltzmann distribution, so you can tweak the temperature to control the diversity of it. And here's what we found in our ICLR 2024 paper. Each dot on this figure denounce the quality and the diversity of a different KL penalty weight. In this KL penalty weight is beta there. And then we can see that increasing the KL penalty weight does improve the diversity, but it sacrifices the quality a lot. Similarly, the dots in this figure denounce the quality and diversity at a different temperature tau. And as you can see, if you increase the temperature, then the model will become more diverse, right? It does improve the diversity a little bit, and without sacrificing much of the quality. But if you compare diversity improvement of both figures, you will see that temperature doesn't contribute too much on the diversity gain. So neither approach fully achieved the balance of high quality and diversity we desire in this plot. So what's wrong with controlling randomness to increase diversity? The first issue is that increasing randomness will trade off the quality. Suppose we have a 6 prompt from the red team model. The red one gets 1. The red one will get reward 1. The blue ones will get reward -1. And we plot the likelihood of red team model generating them on the vertical axis. Suppose this is a high randomness policy. Then the likelihood of generating each prompt will be nearly uniform like this, right? It's not hard to see that this kind of a policy will have low chance to get reward, since low reward prompts denoted as blue one also get a decently high likelihood to be sampled. Secondly, even those we can reduce the likelihood on prompt with low reward, like this, and focus sampling on the prompt with high reward. There is still a problem that we can waste the time on generating the prompt we have already seen already. So if we sample the prompt from this distribution, all of these 3 red dots could be repeatedly sampled many times. But repeatedly generating the same prompt will not help increase the diversity of the prompt we generated throughout the interaction with the target model. So what we desire is to generate new ones at every time step. For example, at the step 1, we randomly sample one of the prompt from this free high reward prompt. And suppose now we selected the rightmost one. At the step 2, we push down the likelihood of the sampling the rightmost one because we have already seen it. We don't want to sample it again. At the step 3, we do it again. And this way, at each time step, we will focus sampling on the unseen and the novel prompt, therefore increasing the diversity of the generated prompt. It turned out that this idea can be realized by adding diversity as part of a reward of RL. Previous method only optimized for quality and control the diversity using randomness, by tuning the randomness. We proposed to store the previously generated prompt as history and then train the red team model to make a difference to the history of the prompt. This way, we can push the red team model to not only generate new prompt, but also ensure most of those prompts are effectively triggering unsafe response from the target model. We computed the difference by commonly used language diversity measure like BLEU score or cosine embedding distance. And here, our approach is actually inspired by quality diversity optimization in evolutionary computing community that aims to find diverse, high-quality solutions. But this simple solution was not noticed until our work in the space of large language model training, because QD algorithms in evolutionary computing are largely underexplored in this area. And now here's the example of our experiments from our paper. So we tested our approach using a small GPT-2 model as the red team model. We trained it with reinforcement learning we proposed method, and use a DALI 7B model from Databricks as the target model being tested. And we use a toxicity classifier as a judge to tell the model response safety. Our method show as this blue dot achieved both high quality and diversity, while zero-shot method that directly prompt a language model and the RL method that trained the language model with only reward safety reward struggled with one or both. We also showed a similar result in ChatGPT. We also showed a similar result of using ChatGPT as a target model, or using Stable Diffusion as a target model, and many other models as well. And the toxicity classifier can be replaced with the other metric as well. Okay, now I think this is the most interesting result. Even for highly safety-guarded language model, our method still manages to find a prompt triggering unsafe response. So we performed red teaming on the target model Llama 2 ChatHF. Now it's an obsolete model, but by the time I was doing this research, it was still state-of-the-art model. And this model has been fine-tuned using RLHF to align human preference very well. And according to the official benchmark, it generates 0% of toxic response. But surprisingly, we found 196 prompts that trigger unsafe response from this target model, Llama 2 ChatHF. Finally, let's look at where we are now. In our red teaming paper, we have enabled RL to discover both high quality and diversity solutions, even though the method is simple. We have the tools to learn from limited learning signals to solve discovery problems more efficiently and learn diverse solutions. And what's next? My past work have focused on robotics a lot, since that inspired me in the beginning and kicked off my 7 years journey on researching on that. And as the next step, I want to extend my research to take on exploration challenges in scientific discovery application, because if we can find the corner cases in red teaming chatbot or find the bug in video games, say, then I think if we can apply this technique to scientific discovery, then we can possibly find some rare material or rare drug that could lead to interesting and impactful findings. But different from robotics, each material this experiment could take much longer time and cost and higher cost. So we need an algorithm that explore more efficiently. Previously, we often train RL algorithm from scratch with the assistance of shaping reward or static data set. However, we may not have this luxury to iterate the design of reward shaping in those scientific domains, right? Because to experiment is just very expensive. And also we do not have a big enough data set to directly train our model on the experiment we want. So I believe one promising approach is to leverage the recent advance of the foundation models like language models for exploration, because those models have encoded extensive knowledge from various domains, serving as a strong bridge to jumpstart exploration. But however, from a reinforcement learning researcher point of view, simply using language model is definitely not enough, because they are only fitted on the existing knowledge. And we needed to explore beyond the current literature and to find a new knowledge. That's why they have to interact with the world. Therefore, we need an approach to enable language model to actively propose experiment, reducing uncertainty about the world, and adapt to limited online feedback. And currently, we rely heavily on in-context learning to do so. But in the future, I plan to integrate the insight from our online reinforcement learning perspective to come up with more principled solution to enable language models' exploratory behaviors online. And that's all for my presentation. Thanks for my committee. Yeah, and especially thanks Leslie, because yeah. She's always very responsive and always has a lot of insight while we discuss my my slides and also the presentation of my research work. And also thanks for Scott. Yeah, I mean it's a busy time for Scott, but he still managed to squeeze his time for my defense now. And yeah, really thanks for it. And also thanks for Pocket about having me in the lab. Yeah, I still remember the first time we met in your Japan, maybe Osaka, and it was in a reception. I was approaching to Pocket, but I didn't know he was a professor yet. And I was a little bit drunk and having a bigger discussion on his previous work on curiosity-driven exploration, because that is and also learning to poke by poke. Yeah, well, that was my favorite work. Yeah, and also thanks to my friends and collaborators. Yeah, they are all over from different places. And this is overflow page. Yeah. And thanks my wife. She stayed up late rehearsal for me. And by the way, I didn't put her photo because she preferred to represent in this icon. This, by the way, this is her GitHub repo photo. So I mean, and she's a backend software engineer, very good. So if you are hired, send her a message. And that's it. Thanks for. And I think we have time to take a few questions. Okay.
So regarding the second part of your talk,
Yeah.
you basically make some kind of reweighting of the probability distribution. So that reminds me about some long-tailed recognition in computer vision and these days trend in the LLM, which is data set selection. So could you give the guidance about the connection between these all three?
So I'm not quite sure about the literature in computer vision about long tail distribution, but I think the best insight I got in doing that project is that we have to first decide what distribution. Like we have to decide the relation, build the relation about our model performance and the distribution of the data. And in my example, I build a relation between the model policy performance and the data distribution. And so I think it will, but there are definitely other approach doing weighted sampling without building such a relation. For example, there are a bunch of different uncertainty weighted sampling in offline RL as well, but they are not grounded on any principles. So I mean, if they are not guided by this principle, I think I think we are just coming up with some heuristic to weight data. So I think the best, I think it will be good if we can first decide what's the best distribution we want in language model and the computer vision space, and then building on that, we decide an approach to optimize the data distribution. Yeah, and I think that is definitely relevant. So, for example, if you want to make highlight more on long tail data, I think maybe you can think of one idea is that how does the long tail data attribute to your model performance? And if you come up with that relation, then I think there will be a straightforward metric to maximize to decide the data sampling weight. If you can give more like context, we can discuss.
Yeah, we can
sure.
discuss.
Srinas?
In the second part of the talk,
Yeah.
I guess so like you're reweighting the data so that data from high performing trajectories gets weighted higher, but typically it's lower weight, and then vice versa for lower performing trajectories.
Yeah.
Does that decrease like the, quote unquote, effective amount of data you have access to? Like, I guess in particular, there's that constant you're subtracting in performance for the lower bound. How does that constant change with the reweighting?
So that constant is dependent. I remember it's only dependent on the occurrence. I mean, it's not depending on the density of the data distribution. So I think it only remember it depends on the size of the number of unique states, which is the data set size you cover. So I mean, after reweighting, you change the weight of each data, but the coverage, I mean the support, remains to be the same. And I think that's why reweighting will not change much on that part. Thanks. Yeah, sure.
So I'm pretty interested in your ongoing effort or ongoing future research about trying to use LLM for optimization.
Yeah.
Because this is an extremely hard problem because for example, I'm not sure if LLM is really trained on such heavy, optimization data, and also how well it understands the numerical space. So what do you think would be best or the most promising approach to move forward? Do you think just scaling up the model will solve the issue, or you have to explicitly use some kind of search or kind of other existing tools?
So I thinking of this problems recently as well. So I think there are two directions to scale up the material research. One idea I'm thinking of is actually we can make use of the insight we have in robotics for sync to real. So I think many of my colleagues in material science department, they have been complaining about they have some surrogate model or proxy models to evaluate model property. I mean, so if those models are perfect, then you can actually just propose a bunch of different material, evaluate on them, and select pre-screen a bunch of good candidates, right? But the problem is that those models are not good enough. So even though you do optimization on that model, you could still suffer from a lot of a sync to real gap there in the real world. The solution you find in simulation is not going to be good in the real world. But in that space, I think no one has think of this problem as a sync to real problem and use the strategies in robotics to deal with that. One idea is that if we can maybe use some RMAs, like some domain adaptation or system identification approach, we pre-train some models and we use a few online interaction to identify, what's the good models we have learned before that best match the current situation. I think in that space, that idea has not been explored in that material science research space. I think the second idea is that we can pre-train the model to explore as well. So I mean, now the language model was only trained on fitting the existing data sets, right? We do next token prediction, SFT on the provided data set, and the demonstration we could do align to human preference. But I would say this approach are not training models to explore on now. So for example, even those in RLHF, we use reinforcement learning to align human preference, but we are not actually use the training the model to discover new things by taking the feedback from the online interactions, right? And the most importantly, aligning human preference does not mean that it will be able to discover new knowledge from the environment. So one of the idea I'm thinking of is that maybe simulate a lot of the maybe synthetic tasks in simulation, and those tasks will require exploration. And if our language model was trained to solve those tasks very well, like they can propose, they can demonstrate efficient exploration, no regret exploration in those environments, then we can kind of expect that they will do well in real domain as well. That's the two ideas I'm thinking of for this kind of material research.
Okay, thank you.